Welcome to The Explainer. So, what if I told you that the reality you experience every single day, the rules, the meanings, the whole social order, isn't nearly as solid as it feels? Today, we're going to dive into a theory that says we don't just live in the social world, we're actually the ones building it together in every single moment.
To really get what that means, let's start with a simple little puzzle that kind of peels back the curtain on how we build this shared reality of ours. All right, take a look at this. It's just a raised hand. Seems pretty simple, right? But what does it actually, mean?
Well, if you're in a classroom, it means you have a question. But if you're at an auction, it's a bid on an item. It's the exact same physical gesture, but it has completely different meanings. The action itself is kind of meaningless without the social context we all just agree on. So the real question is, how does this invisible agreement even work?
Well, the tool that sociologists use to understand that very agreement is called phenomenology. It basically teaches us to look past the action itself and instead focus on the shared, subjective experience of what's happening.
And here's the core insight, the really big idea. Phenomenology says there isn't one single objective social world that's just out there waiting for us. No, instead, we are actively building our social reality from the inside out through all of our shared interpretations and experiences. Now, this powerful idea was first pioneered by a philosopher, Edmund Husserl. He really wanted to get to the bottom of how we experience things at all. And then, his work was brilliantly adapted for sociology by Alfred Schutz, who's the one who really gave us the framework for analyzing our everyday social lives. So Alfred Schutz gave us these two fantastic concepts that are basically the building blocks for this shared reality we've been talking about. The first one is called the life world. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like an invisible operating system for our social lives. It's this whole collection of assumptions we just take for granted, all the background rules that let us move through the world without constantly having to stop and ask, wait, what are we doing right now? And running on that life world operating system are these little apps we call typifications. These are the mental shortcuts, the labels we use all the time. Student, cashier, friend. They help stabilize meaning so we can interact efficiently, without needing the full life story of every single person we meet. Okay, so this all might sound a little abstract, but how does this lens actually help in the real world? Well, it can completely reframe how we understand even the most difficult social issues like suicide. You see, for a long, long time, sociology followed the groundbreaking work of Emil Durkheim. He treated suicide like a statistic, an objective social fact that was driven by these big, external societal pressures like economic shifts or social isolation. Durkheim's perspective was absolutely revolutionary, but it focused entirely on these outside forces. The individual's internal world, their own personal experience, and what they intended, that just wasn't part of the equation. And that leaves this huge, crucial question just sitting there. What did the act actually mean to the person themselves? For a phenomenologist, you simply cannot understand the social fact without first digging into the subjective experience. And this is exactly what the sociologist Steve Taylor did. He went beyond the statistics and looked at the personal meanings behind the act. And what he found was that it wasn't one single social fact at all. It was at least 4 distinct experiences, and each one was defined not by outside forces, but by the person's own internal reality.
And listen, this isn't just guesswork. Researchers use really rigorous methods, like deeply analyzing personal accounts from interviews or diaries. They're looking for the patterns within these subjective experiences, and that's how they can turn individual stories into powerful social insights.
And this focus on lived experience definitely didn't stop there. Today, the conversation is still evolving, and it's pushing into some really new and critical areas of sociology.
So for example, you have fields like queer phenomenology that use this same toolkit to ask really important questions like, how does the shared experience of being, say, a queer person in a world built on heterosexual norms create its own unique life world? It shifts the focus from just individual experience to how our identities within systems of power shape the very reality we construct.
Of course, like any approach, this one has its own trade-offs. On the one hand, its greatest strength is this incredibly rich, deep view of human meaning. But on the other, critics point out that by focusing so intensely on our subjective worlds, it can sometimes downplay the massive structural forces, things like economic inequality or political systems, that shape and constrain those very worlds we live in. So, when you boil it all down, phenomenology's most powerful contribution is this simple reminder. Our social world isn't some fixed stage that we just walk onto. It's more like a live performance that we are all creating, rehearsing, and improvising together in every single interaction we have.
So I'll leave you with this. Now that you have this new lens, what's one assumption in your own life world, your own reality, that you've never really questioned until right now? And maybe more importantly, in the next conversation you have today, what reality will you choose to build?